On the night of September 7th, 1996, Las Vegas was glowing the way it always does. Neon signs, crowded sidewalks, traffic rolling past casinos where people had come to win, lose, celebrate, disappear for a weekend. But inside one black BMW, sitting at a red light near East Flamingo Road and Koval Lane, was one of the most famous young artists in the world. Tupac Shakur was 25 years old, a rapper, actor, poet, provocateur, son, friend, symbol, and target. Within seconds, gunfire would tear through the passenger side of the car. Tupac would be hit multiple times. 6 days later, he would be dead. For decades, his murder became one of the most discussed unsolved killings in modern music history. There were theories, rumors, interviews, books, documentaries, names repeated again and again. But for nearly 27 years, no one was charged. Then, in 2023, Las Vegas police arrested Duane Keffe D. Davis, a former Compton gang figure who had spoken publicly about the night Tupac was shot. Davis has pleaded not guilty. He is accused, not convicted. This is not just the story of a famous rapper's death. It is the story of a city, a feud, a violent night after a boxing match, and a case that refused to stay buried. This is the murder of Tupac Shakur. To understand why September 7, 1996 became so dangerous, we need to begin before Las Vegas. Tupac Shakur had already lived several lives by the time he was 25. Born in New York in 1971, raised amid poverty, politics, art, and instability, Tupac grew into an artist who seemed to carry contradiction like oxygen. He could be tender, furious, funny, reckless, brilliant, wounded. His music spoke about police brutality, poverty, racism, paranoia, loyalty, fame, and survival. And by 1996, he was not just successful, he was everywhere. His album All Eyes on Me had become a landmark release. His face was on magazine covers, his interviews were electric. But his life was also surrounded by conflict. Legal problems, media scrutiny, public rivalries, and the increasingly toxic East Coast-West Coast tension had all formed a storm around him. After signing with Death Row Records, Tupac became closely associated with Marion Suge Knight, the label's powerful and controversial co-founder. Death Row was dominant, intimidating, and constantly under the spotlight. And in 1996, Tupac was moving at a speed that looked impossible to sustain. On September 7, 1996, Tupac was in Las Vegas for a major boxing event. Mike Tyson was fighting Bruce Seldon at the MGM Grand. Tyson and Tupac were friends, and Tupac attended the fight with Suge Knight and others connected to Death Row. The fight itself was brief. Tyson won in the first round. The crowd spilled out into the casino corridors, the kind of post-fight chaos Las Vegas knows well. And then came the moment that investigators would later see as central to the night. Inside the MGM Grand, Tupac and members of his group encountered a man named Orlando Anderson. Anderson was associated with the South Side Compton Crips. Months earlier, he had allegedly been involved in an altercation involving a Death Row associate. Inside the casino, surveillance footage captured Tupac and others attacking Anderson. The fight was brief, violent, and public. And after that moment, the clock began moving toward East Flamingo Road. It is important to say this clearly. Being involved in a fight does not mean someone deserves what happened next. Nothing that happened in that casino justified murder. But investigators have long examined whether that fight became the spark for the shooting that followed. Later that night, Tupac and Suge Knight left the MGM Grand in a black BMW. They were reportedly headed toward Club 662, a nightclub connected to Death Row. Tupac was in the passenger seat. Suge Knight was driving. The Las Vegas Strip was busy. Cars moved through traffic. People recognized Tupac. Cameras flashed. Music played. To people nearby, it may have looked like another celebrity night in Vegas, but it was about to become a crime scene. At one point, police stopped the BMW for loud music and issues involving the vehicle's plates. No citation was issued, and the car continued. Minutes later, at around 11:15 p.m., the BMW stopped at a red light near East Flamingo Road and Koval Lane. A white Cadillac pulled up alongside them. Then the shooting started. Multiple rounds were fired into the BMW. Tupac was struck in the chest, arm, and thigh. Suge Knight was grazed by a bullet fragment. The Cadillac fled. In the chaos that followed, the BMW lurched away from the intersection. Police and emergency services responded. Tupac was rushed to University Medical Center of Southern Nevada. He was critically injured. Doctors performed emergency surgery. His right lung was reportedly removed. Fans gathered. Rumors spread. The hip-hop world waited. For 6 days, Tupac remained in hospital. On September 13, 1996, Tupac Shakur died. He was 25. The immediate aftermath was grief, confusion, and noise. Tupac's death was not just a music story. It became a cultural rupture. For young fans, he was a voice that said things they had never heard said so plainly. For critics, he was controversial and dangerous. For his family and friends, he was a human being whose life had been violently cut short. And for investigators, the case was already difficult. The shooting happened on a busy Las Vegas street. There were many possible witnesses, but cooperation was limited. Street codes, fear of retaliation, distrust of police, and the celebrity chaos surrounding Tupac all created barriers. Detectives had names, they had theories, they had fragments, but they did not have a charge. Orlando Anderson was quickly discussed in connection with the case. He denied involvement. He was never charged. In 1998, Anderson was killed in an unrelated gang shooting. Another potential path in the investigation was gone. Over the years, journalists, retired detectives, authors, and documentary makers continued examining the case. Some focused on the MGM fight. Some focused on gang rivalries in Compton. Some focused on death row's enemies. Others pushed broader theories involving music industry figures, rival artists, or elaborate conspiracies. But a theory is not evidence. And in this story, the line between documented fact and speculation has often been blurred. What is documented is this. In the years after Tupac's death, Duane Keffe D. Davis became one of the most important public voices connected to the case. Davis is the uncle of Orlando Anderson. He has described being in the Cadillac involved in the shooting. He has spoken about the night in interviews and in a memoir. Prosecutors now argue that his own statements help connect him to the killing. Davis's defense has argued that past statements were made for attention, entertainment, or profit, and that the state's case is flawed. Again, Davis has pleaded not guilty. He is presumed innocent unless proven guilty in court. In July 2023, Las Vegas police searched a home in Henderson, Nevada, connected to Davis's family. The search signaled that the cold case was not as cold as people believed. Then, on September 29, 2023, Duane Davis was arrested. He was charged with murder with use of a deadly weapon. It was the first major prosecution in Tupac Shakur's killing. For many fans, the arrest felt surreal. Tupac had been gone for nearly 3 decades. Entire generations had grown up with his music as history, not breaking news. Yet suddenly, the case was back inside a courtroom. The question was no longer only, who killed Tupac? It became, can prosecutors prove it after all this time? Cold cases are difficult because time changes everything. Witnesses die, memories shift, evidence becomes harder to test. Public statements can be challenged, motives can be argued in multiple directions. And when a case has lived for decades in documentaries, interviews, books, songs, and online debate, separating evidence from legend becomes even harder. Prosecutors are expected to rely heavily on Davis's statements over the years. The defense is expected to attack those statements, their reliability, and the surrounding evidence. What happened at that red light is not in question. What remains contested is legal responsibility. Part of why Tupac's murder remains so powerful is that his death seemed to freeze him in motion. He was not fading. He was not retreating. He was recording constantly, filming, performing, arguing, building mythology in real time. His image after death became almost impossible to separate from the man himself. For some, Tupac became a martyr. For others, he became a warning about fame, violence, and the industry around him. But behind the symbol was a mother who lost her son, friends who lost someone they knew before the posters and headlines, fans who still remember exactly where they were when they heard he had died. The Las Vegas shooting also changed hip-hop history. 6 months after Tupac's death, Christopher Wallace, known as the Notorious B.I.G., was killed in Los Angeles. Two of the biggest rappers of the 1990s were dead before the age of 30. Their deaths became linked in the public imagination, but each case deserves its own facts. Each family deserves more than rumors, and each victim deserves to be remembered as a person, not just as fuel for conspiracy. In Tupac's case, the known timeline of September 7th is stark. A championship fight at the MGM Grand, a casino altercation involving Orlando Anderson, a black BMW leaving the Strip, a stop by police, a red light near Flamingo and Koval, a white Cadillac, gunfire, 6 days in hospital, then silence. But there is another timeline too. 27 years of waiting, 27 years of interviews, 27 years of names resurfacing, 27 years of fans asking why one of the most visible men in America could be shot in Las Vegas and still have no one charged. And then, finally, an arrest. Whether that arrest leads to a conviction is a separate question. The courtroom must decide what can be proven, not what sounds convincing online, not what has been repeated for years, not what fits the cleanest story. Proof. Tupac once seemed larger than life because he spoke as though time was always running out. In the end, it was. He died at 25, leaving behind music that still sounds urgent, interviews that still feel alive, and a murder case that has never fully released its grip on popular culture. On East Flamingo Road, near Koval Lane, the city moved on. Cars kept passing, casinos kept glowing, Las Vegas kept selling escape. But for Tupac Shakur, there would be no morning after. As of now, Duane Keffe D. Davis awaits trial, accused in connection with the murder. He denies the charge. The legal process continues. And almost 30 years after the shooting, the world is still watching. Because some deaths do not fade, they echo. This was the murder of Tupac Shakur. You're watching Vanished UK.